Hola, soy Gabriel Urza. Soy de los Estados Unidos, pero mi familia es de origen vasco. Les voy a hablar hoy de mi novela Todo lo que siguió después, publicada en inglés en 2015 y que acaba de publicar en castellano Ediciones B. All That Followed is a novel that's set in the late 1990s in Muriga, which is a fictional town in the Basque Country. And the story is primarily about the kidnapping and killing of a young politician there. However, the novel is told from the point of view of three different people that are associated with this councilman that is abducted and eventually killed. It's told from the point of view of Yoni, or Johnny, who is an older American who has been living in Muriga since the 1950s and has seen a lot of the history in the town. The second narrator is Mariana, and she is the widow of the abducted city councilman. And the final narrator is a young man by the name of Iker, and he is a young, I guess you would call him a political radical, who becomes involved in the kidnapping and killing of the city councilman, who in the book is named Miguel Angel Torres. And the reason why I chose three narrators is because I think what interests me most about the story of this political kidnapping and killing is not so much the act itself, but how we got to this point, how these three characters see themselves as related to, and in some ways having some responsibility for, in different ways, for the kidnapping and the killing. I think there are probably two primary reasons why I decided to write this novel. The first is that my own family is from the Basque Country, and over the years I've spent a lot of time visiting there. And so I am aware of the political history as well as sort of the social dynamics, I think, that exist in the Basque Country. And I've always found that to be very interesting and also to be a part of my own identity as a Basque American. I think the second reason why I chose to write the novel is because I have experienced myself as a public defender here in the United States, where I dealt with a lot of the worst crimes, including murders. And what was interesting to me about working as a public defender was similar to the book, not so much the act itself. Usually there's not very much question about what happened or who is responsible in a criminal sense for a criminal act or a crime. But what interested me the most was getting to know these people that we think of just as criminals generically, and finding out that they are complicated people, that their reasons why they participate in a criminal act that we find incomprehensible is actually oftentimes very comprehensible and very complicated. So part of the goal for me in writing the book was to portray somebody who we would think of as a criminal in a lot of ways, but also to complicate that character and complicate that criminal act. It took me probably 2.5 years to write a solid first draft of the novel. I started in 2010 when I was finishing my Master's of Fine Arts in Creative Writing at The Ohio State University. And I finished it and sent it to my agent in, probably September of 2013. So maybe 3 years. During that time, I went back to the Basque Country for about 2 months at one point while I was writing the first draft, and I took some classes in Euskera in the Basque language. And then also I was just taking a lot of notes while I was there, keeping my eyes open and looking at the setting, talking to people, just trying to make the novel as authentic as possible. A lot of times people describe the novel as being a mystery novel or a thriller, but I don't think that's really true. We find out in the first chapter what happens, who gets killed, and by who, and for what reason. So if somebody's looking for a mystery when they find out who the killer is on the last page, then they're going to be disappointed. What's most interesting to me about this book is the characters. And so the goal of the book is to go through and start to take away the layers and find out what makes these characters tick and also how they view the situation. I think that hopefully people will be primarily entertained with the story. I hope that it's a well-told story and that people will just enjoy reading it. Secondly, I hope also that, as I mentioned earlier, people in a more general sense start to think about criminal acts and about crimes in a more complicated way. It's very easy to say that this person is good or this person is bad, or that this is an offender and this is a victim. But I think that usually life is more complicated than that. So I hope that readers start to think about political situations and also just everyday crimes in more complicated ways. When I was living in the Basque Country in 1997 and 1998, there was certainly a lot of conflict at that time, and so there were a lot of cases that I was following and that I was aware of and that I subsequently researched. And certainly one of the most important at the time that stands out to me is the kidnapping of Miguel Ángel Blanco. But at the same time, none of these cases specifically served as an inspiration for the novel. The characters in the novel are completely fictional, and I was really intentional with that because I wanted to have the freedom to write about characters that weren't attached to a history in a way. I think that in some ways I identify with all three of the main characters and the narrators of the novel, in the sense that all three of them see themselves as outsiders. Yoni, who's the older American, is maybe the most like me in the sense that he has a connection to the Basque Country. He's been there for so long. But at the same time, because he is primarily an American born in the United States, he'll always be seen as an outsider, no matter what he does. Iker, the young man, I think he feels radicalized and isolated in a way that a lot of us do when we are in our teens, and that I certainly felt in a way as well. And then Mariana also, she's very different than me in the sense that she's a female, she's a widow at the time. I now have a daughter, but at the time that I was writing the book, I didn't have children, and she has a daughter and is married. And so on one level, I think that we don't have a lot in common, but on another level, I think that we do, which is that there's a sort of sense of isolation that we can have in small communities if we feel like we are just a little bit outside of the norm. And I don't think that I feel that way more than probably a lot of people do, but I certainly identified with her. I was very satisfied with the reaction with the reception of the book in the United States. I was concerned initially just because it's an untraditional book in many ways. It is a mystery novel where we find out who is kidnapped and who is killed and by who and for what purpose in the first chapter of the book. So just structurally, it's not a conventional book. And then secondly, and perhaps more importantly, it's set in Spain, and which is not a normal place for a book to be set in the United States. And more specifically, it's set in the Basque Country in Spain. And one of the issues that I was worried about was that readers would not be familiar with the conflict and with the independence movement in the Basque Country. So part of my job was to educate them about this history. In reading a lot of the reviews of the book, I felt like people were understanding that history, at least what they needed to know to understand the book. So in that sense, I was very happy. I was born in the United States, but to Basque parents. So my father was born in Sestao, in the Basque Country, and my mom was born in the United States, but her family is from the French side of the Basque Country. So I was lucky when I grew up to be around a lot of Basque culture in the United States. Basque culture in the United States is really different than Basque culture in the Basque Country. in the sense that most of the Basque culture here comes from the Basque sheep herders that came over in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. So Basque culture in the United States is almost frozen. It's very antiquated. And I think probably people from Spain and the Basque Country would think it was funny when they came to the United States to see a Basque picnic or a Basque festival, for example, because all of the dances, all of the songs are from 60 years ago. But I've also been lucky in that my father works a lot with the Basque Country. He works for an exchange program for students, and so we have a lot of Basque scholars and Spanish scholars coming to the United States, to the university where my father was working when I was growing up. And they would come to dinner and we would speak about the political situation, about culture, about art, about literature. In that sense, I felt very lucky. I also had the opportunity to live in the Basque Country at various times over the course of my life, and I think that this helped me also understand the place and understand the dynamics of the history and politics. Number 10. Certainly when I'm thinking about Spanish and Basque literature, the first person that comes to mind is Bernardo Achaga. I read Obabacoa probably 2 years before I started writing this book. And also his book, The Accordionist's Son, was something that was very influential on me. I think that not only the beauty of the writing and the historical and political context were interesting to me, but also the way that he deals with structure and character. Outside of that, I think structurally one of the biggest influences on this book would be David Mitchell's Cloud Atlas. And this is a book that's subsequently been made into a movie, but it deals with genre, it deals with structure and chronology, very interesting ways that I was certainly thinking about when I was writing this book. I do get a chance to go back to Spain pretty regularly. I was in Bilbao and near there just about 2 months ago. I'm writing an article for a travel magazine. So I was there only for about 6 days, but I was able to see quite a bit. And every time I get a chance to go back to Spain and to the Basque Country, it's always the highlight of my year because I feel such a connection with the place and with its history. All right, thank you.